Today we're going to be collaborating with the Cape Crusader as we have a look at the new DC Collectibles DC Essentials figure number 1, Batman. Yes, the Cape Crusader is ready for action in this 6.81-inch DC Essentials Batman action figure that features an impressive 21 points of articulation. Speaking of breaking out, I got a brand new tape measure. It's going to be able to tell you digitally how tall a figure is. I figure it'd be a little bit easier than me telling you. But the first time we're using this tape measure, let's give it a go. I've kind of just been playing around with it for the last couple of days. But we're going to, I don't know if you can see it, but it does tell you the exact measurement, in this case, of a toy, even though it's really used for construction purposes. Anyways, there's a little hold button on the side, so I'm going to put it to the top of Batman. The figure technically is touted at being 6.18 inches. I think that's roughly to the top of his ear. I'm going to hit hold, and it's telling us that it's 6.8 inches in height. You can also switch it over to centimeters. If somebody was asking how tall it is in centimeters, you'd be looking at 17.4 centimeters in height. Despite for the fact that this is the new lineup from DC Collectibles, the DC Essentials line, a lot of vast improvements, but sadly, one of which is not additional accessories. The only thing you're getting here with the Essentials version of Batman is just a Batarang. That's it. That's all you're getting. A rather thick Batarang. It is still made of a somewhat more brittle plastic, so I wouldn't advise going like this. Going like this is going to definitely break it. But he does come with one Batarang. That's it. That's all you're getting. You can go ahead and put it into only really one of his hand. The other hand is completely closed shut, so you ain't getting squat. You're getting nothing from this hand. Everything is being done over here. And he holds it in place like so. I just want to also comment for the fact, usually I would talk about this near the end of this review, but he does have no peg holes on the undersides of his feet, which is utmost surprising. I really would have thought peg holes would have been a given. At the very least, then you could display him in some pretty dynamic poses. Unfortunately, though, as cool as he is, and for the fact that he also has 21 points of articulation, you sadly can't do anything with him unless you found yourself like a little clip or something you could put around his waist. As for the figure itself, I do really like this one quite a bit. It makes me think, having looked at the DC Icons figure line, which sadly was a much shorter line, this is a vast improvement. The head sculpt is glorious. Admitting, though, it's not 100% perfect, while I do think the head sculpt is excellent on Batman here, the paint unfortunately does seem at times like it's not completely finished, like a second coat of paint could have maybe gone a long way. Unfortunately, to the detriment of this particular figure as well, is the lighting of the studio, if you will, is making it even worse than it actually is in hand. When you have it in hand, it's not as noticeable, but certainly it's something I should point out here. I don't know why, but the chin, the cheeks are a slightly darker shade, or at the very least, it looks like they've got a little bit more paint to them than the rest of his face. But the head sculpt is fantastic. I dare tread on hallowed grounds here by saying it could be one of my new Batman favorite figures. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, wait a minute. You said the DC Direct, Batman and Superman. I think it was the Public Enemies, or may have been the one right after, Enemies Among Us. I thought that was your favorite Batman. It still is, but I really like this head sculpt quite a bit. Paint is generally pretty clean, and at the top it looks like there's either some smudging or some excess paint that just decided for no apparent reason just to find its way on the top of Batman's forehead here. The eyes are quite bright, though small, yes. He does have a nice side portrait. He does have a nice front as well if you're looking at him straight on. Favoring something closer to being the short ears on Batman, which seems to be the go-to nowadays. I'm perfectly fine with that. This is also, of course, for anyone with visible, well, anybody that can see this will see that Batman's, both his cowl, his gloves, and of course his boots are painted in blue. Definitely would entertain the idea of seeing this same mold, as of course mileage always is in the mindset of the companies that are producing these pieces. Let's get as much bang for our buck out of the same mold. Would love to see this one also get released in the black cowl and black cape, black gloves, and black boots. Paint for what little is really being seen here, because really ideally his body could be, it may actually be a slightly darker plastic that's underneath that, but I think that they would have made more sense to mold it in gray, which is probably what they've likely done. The Bat Emblem is, of course, the new Rebirth emblem, so it does sport not so much the oval with the Bat Emblem interior, but instead the Bat Emblem with a nice yellow outline to it. Very clean, very crisp, very refreshing. As for the utility belt, again, the new upgraded utility belt, more angular, more linear than just a pocketed utility belt. I don't really know how Batman would hold anything in such small compartments like this, but to the testament of DC Collectibles, the paint is very nicely clean, very well applied, the black over top of it. Doesn't seem like it misses any mark whatsoever. I've noticed though, there are like these little kind of scratches and wears at this, making me almost think that there was a color underneath the gray. I wish it wasn't. It didn't necessarily have all the imperfection that it does looking at it, but otherwise, again, pretty good with the paint. The cape favoring a more interior purple on the outside being the blue. I like the very straight nature of the cape. It's soft, it's pliable, it's copacetic, and again, it's not a very broad, obnoxious, oh, I dislike the obnoxious capes on Batman. But this one, sadly, or this one to its credit, doesn't have that, so I like that. His boots, I just want to show you his boots are more of a matte blue. The cape is a matte blue, or slightly matter blue, and then of course his head's a matte blue. Interestingly enough though, and I guess it's more considered armor, that his gauntlet portion of his glove is a shinier blue plastic, while the glove itself is matte. And making me think that this is armor rather than a glove portion. You can see some of that shinier blue make its way into platelets that are on the glove, as well as almost the brass knuckles on the ends of the knuckle area of the gloves. He's even got one actually around the thumb area there as well. Again, I really like the sculpt. My biggest problem when it came to DC Icons figure line was just simply it was too small. And I'm likely thinking that I shared that opinion with many other collectors, and the reasoning why the line just didn't do so well. DC Collectibles, trying as they might to get the icons really off the ground, struggled for a bit, and I think really the culprit for that is the sizing. Now that we've got ourselves a full true size, I really hope they certainly run further with this. Articulation, let's go through that together. His head rotates all the way around, and it also has a sufficient hinge, giving you to about that angle tilt on Batman's head. As well, you can tilt that far down on his head. So if he's looking at, for example, Damian, you could have Damian, I don't know if they would ever release him, I hope they do. So a good sufficient amount in his head posability. His arms hinge outward. It looks like there is a pin and hinge socket there on the shoulder. The arms rotate all the way around. You'll see that the cape is a separate component. I did think initially that that may have been a bad idea, but the more now I'm rotating things such as his arms, I'm actually glad that the cape is a separate piece. It allows you to also move the cape to the side if you want to have something a little bit more dynamic. It kind of gives Batman that sense like the cape is kind of blowing off to the side. I really dig that. He does have a swivel on the upper bicep area. As well, it could be said he's got a double hinge on the elbow. There's a hinge right there and a right there, and an upper elbow shot to the Joker, if you will. Then of course he has the swivel in the hand. The wrist also hinges back and forth. upper torso crunch, although on my figure it's a little on the stiff side still. He's got a waist swivel. And then when it comes to his legs favoring a ball joint. I'm glad they went with the route of a ball joint on this. Swivel on the top cut of the thigh. It's, again, a little on the stiff side. It's right there. Right there. He's got a double hinge on the knee. Nothing in the boot portion, this section right here. Although he does have that pin hinge joint on the ankle, which is only, unfortunately, the one problem I have with the figure. I'm overall really ecstatic by this release of Batman. Sadly, though, I find his ankles a little on the loose side. Also doesn't help for the fact that he doesn't have peg holes on the undersides of his feet, so if you really wanted, again, to get creative and zany with Batman's displaying options, you're sort of relegated to having him standing in museum pose. This can also be a very difficult feat, no pun intended, for the fact that Batman does have slightly loose ankles. And that may not be everybody's ankles, I have to stress that. It sadly is just mine, and that makes me sad. What does not make me sad, though, is the fact that DC Collectibles would go back to the drawing board and kind of look and assess what the problems were with the DC icons. I get for the fact that they wanted to introduce a brand new line size category, but unfortunately it backfired because a lot of collectors didn't like the idea that their favorite heroes were of a smaller nature versus some of the other DC Collectibles offerings on the market. By giving us this newer, more accurate read scale, I think is where this line is now going to be successful. I don't feel as if it's going to have the struggling, stumbling blocks that the Icons figure line had, because now they're doing it right. They're giving us a size at about 7 inches roughly. You saw the tape measure at the beginning of this review. At about 7 inches, this is the line that we should have got back then. Now, speaking of Batman here, I do really like this head design. I love this head design. I find, if anything, the one figure that's going to make or break this line, at least in my own opinion, or the one figure that I'm going to really be hard on when he eventually gets released, is this Superman. So far, from what I've seen of images of the DC Essentials Superman, I think the head sculpt still seems a little bit on the offside, but I really like the head sculpt here on Batman. If I could only have added a peg hole on the underside of his feet, and a couple more accessories, I think this Batman would be still a home run hit. He is still a home run hit, don't get me wrong, but I do think he should have had peg holes on the undersides of his feet, which is so odd for me to say that, because normally 9 times out of 10, I'm complaining that a figure has peg holes, but not a display stand, or that the figure stands perfectly fine, despite for the fact that he does have peg holes. Batman here on the very opposite contrast to that. I really wish this guy did have peg holes, so you could get a little bit more creative with him. And speaking of creative, digging the fact that you can move the cape as a separate component piece, it does mean that you can get a little bit more zanier, if you will, by posing Batman by having his cape slightly swaying off to the side. A nice touch, DC Collectibles, and I'm very excited to see what you're going to be doing now with this brand new line. Today we were having a look at the DC Collectibles DC Essentials. This was figure number 1, and this was Batman. By the way, if you're looking to pick this one up for yourself, it's currently now available at your local comic book stores, and of course, I'm sure you could pick this one up online as well. I also managed to pick up the Reverse Flash. I'm very excited to pick that one up. Have a look at that one. I didn't get a chance to find the Deathstroke or the Flash, but like I always say to you guys, I asked my local comic book store if they could order it in, so as soon as those two come in, we're going to have a look at them on this channel as well. Speaking of this channel, you haven't subscribed yet? What are you waiting for? Hit that little subscribe button down below. You'll never miss a beat when it comes to future videos. And of course, more videos will be coming your way. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.